You want this job. Picture it, you hunched over a candle stub until your eyes water drawing star charts with ink stolen from a monk who probably died of dysentery last Tuesday. On your best day, you're a human Google Maps for princes who think horoscope means the stars owe them gold sex and eternal youth. On your worst, you're blamed for everything from a bad harvest to a royal hangnail. Zero Wi-Fi, zero weekends, zero chance you'll invent the telescope before your teeth fall out. Forget modern perks. No Instagram followers, no cloud backups, just a clay-caked stylus and a crowd of illiterates who think your astrological house is a place to store firewood. Each chart must be perfect because a crooked line means the king suspects treason. Don't bother looking for a union rep. Your colleagues are as eager to see you fail as your enemies, because there's only so many coins and only one head on the block when things go sideways. Big ego, sure. That's how you cope when a bad eclipse ruins your week and the local bishop hates you for drawing Venus with too much enthusiasm. Hope you like politics disguised as astronomy. Today you're called a sage, tomorrow a warlock, and by Saturday maybe just that burned spot by the gallows. Still think medieval gig work sounds romantic. There's always room for one more on the woodpile. But you're not just drawing pretty pictures for dusty men with rings and halitosis. You're on call for everything from predicting the next plague to picking the right date for the princess's wedding, as if Mars actually cares about in-laws. Spoiler: when said royal wedding goes up in flames, or the princess accidentally poisons her new cousin, you're left explaining planetary retrograde to a mob that can't spell planet. Lousy alibi. Don't expect honesty either. You fudge those charts. Everybody fudges the charts. Because there's no upside in telling the Duke he'll lose his favorite war and his only heir. Your job description: lying with math and not getting caught. Ever played chess against someone who thinks flipping the board is a strategy? Welcome to the court. Enjoy overtime. Medieval clients don't do business hours. The king gets a toothache at 3 a.m. Guess who's hauling their star maps across a mile of freezing stone just to explain Mercury isn't actually inside his skull? Your Majesty, the stars say you should sleep it off. Then hope he's too tired to order your execution. Vacation policy: you get one, it's called banishment. Good luck collecting a severance package when your last paycheck is 2 moldy turnips and a suspiciously brown sack of coins. They pay you late, and only if your predictions flatter the boss's ego. Congratulate yourself on surviving another season. Don't: someone's brewing a coup, and the new guy likes his horoscopes gloomy. Let's talk tech. The best instrument you'll ever own is a string, a sharp stick, and a half-broken quadrant. The rest is guess and check, plus prayers to a god who statistically never forwarded your mail. You know those fancy brass astrolabes from museum gift shops? Try making one with nothing but chicken bones and a bad attitude. Pro tip: the more elaborate your tools look, the less likely anyone will notice you're winging it. The competition. Picture the worst group project you've suffered on Zoom. Now add voodoo dolls and sabotage. Your fellow astrologers would sell you for a bruised apple. They'll mistakenly swap your lunar tables, talk trash to clients when you're not in the room, and maybe, if you're lucky, slip a rat in your ink. No, you can't network. Networking gets you a knife in the back and a misplaced decimal in next week's eclipse forecast. Still want to ask about collaboration? Oh, and when things go wrong, and they always do, the blame falls on you. Crops fail. Clearly you misread Saturn. Plague returns. Guess you angered the moon. Nothing says job security like being tossed in the stocks next to the pig thief because Jupiter's in a bad mood. Pro tip: learn to fake a seizure when the pitchforks come out. Sleep. That's for nobility. You're up every night sketching lunar epicycles while rodents debate eating your sandals. Winter: you'll wish for a blanket that isn't alive with lice. In summer, you'll dream of a window that opens just so you can leap out. Let's not forget your fans. The only people more obsessed with your work than the king are his enemies. If your prophecy is too rosy, you're accused of currying favor. Too grim, and you're clearly on the payroll of someone with sharper knives and shorter tempers. You've become Switzerland if Switzerland was a sleep-deprived hermit with a chalkboard and no health care. The future. You're not writing legacies. You're scribbling footnotes on goat skin, hopping some half-wit scribe doesn't swap your name for a fart joke. The only star in your future is the one above your shallow, unmarked grave after the plague gets bored. Still romanticizing the gig. Great. Bring your own ink, a plan for plausible deniability, and a fresh excuse for why Mars is unusually testy this month. Welcome to medieval star consulting, like LinkedIn endorsements, except every reference is anonymous, terrified, or dead. Ready to chase greatness? Don't. Run faster and maybe, just maybe, you'll outpace the future for one more solstice. Every other idiot with a chart kit is already behind you, hopping the wind changes long enough to call themselves master for a week. That's career advancement, medieval style. Your horoscope predicted stress, nailed it. No, you're not the genius decoding Morse code by candlelight. Think more bandwidth for doom-scrolling nobles and their hypochondriac queens. Every petty warlord, pox-afflicted duchess, and fever-dream peasant expects you to fetch the stars down for them like Uber Eats, but with less gratitude and way more tooth rot. You're their medieval Wi-Fi, always summoned, always blamed, and never ever up to speed. Tell us if the crops will rot. Which way should we invade? Should I marry my cousin or just throw him in the moat? None of the answers are in your battered chart, but that's not the issue. The real fun begins when you get it wrong, which, yes, is always. Here's your daily inbox, Lord Moldelox demanding a software update because Mars looked angry in his soup last night. Some duke's wife wants her horoscope but can't remember her own birthday, just that she's a Gemini or possibly a goat. The bishop hovers nearby, already fantasizing about accusing you of heresy once you inevitably predict rain for his jousting event. Forget privacy. Courtiers circle you like spam calls at dinner time, but with garlic breath and rusty daggers. Nobody cares about your expertise. They want instant prophecy. Signal interrupted. Prepare for sackcloth, not sympathy. Your home office. Picture a room with open concept walls, meaning open to cold drafts, nosy neighbors, and whatever livestock wanders by. Every consultation is a chance to be outed as a fraud, or worse, just boring. There's no such thing as an out of office. Day, you're spiritually chained to your almanac, and your anxiety 24/7. And about that plaque, medieval oral hygiene is a horror movie. Each time you open your mouth, you transmit halitosis across the kingdom like the world's least wanted hotspot. Plague season, more like gingivitis season year-round. 4 out of 5 medieval dentists recommend fleeing the city, and you're the reason number 5 keeps a sack packed. Every prediction comes with a side of horror. If the stars say famine, panic. If they hint at peace, boring, so doom it is. Predict a new comet. Now you're the cause of every miscarriage, rotten harvest, or moldy wheel of cheese for a 6-mile radius. Even the town crier side-eyes you. The only people who believe you are broke, desperate, or barely literate. And they're not shy about venting when Mercury retrograde doesn't fix their ex's rickets. You sweat through your only robe, stinking of candles, ink, and failure. Dozens of functionally illiterate nobles glare at you for not streaming a comet on demand. Their anger is contagious, not unlike the actual contagions in the air. Oh, and let's upgrade your perks payment in turnips, 6 different diseases per client consultation, and a commemorative witch trial if the weather goes sideways. Every hour you're hounded for updates, by which they mean, haven't we burned you yet? You're always on call, but somehow never on the payroll. Want credibility? Too bad. The town midwife consults chicken guts, the local doctor prescribes leeches for headaches, and you're expected to outprophesy them both with nothing but a cracked astrolabe, and that one page of Ptolemy you didn't spill ale on. Half your job is improv. Yes, your majesty Jupiter rising over the pigsty means your bunion will heal if you sleep upside down tonight. Bedside manner, optional. Your predictions travel fast like rumor on market day with about the same accuracy. Your reputation spreads even faster usually as a punchline. Did you hear the astrologer said the moon would turn red last night? Pity the only thing crimson was his face after Lady Bathory's pie exploded. Still better than the last guy, the one who blamed a solar eclipse for the king's gout and got repurposed as moat decor. Remember Geoffrey Chaucer? He dabbled in astrology too, until the Black Death rerouted his career toward fart jokes and road trip poetry. When the best outcome for a medieval astrologer is pivoting to satire, you know the reception is bad. You thought your biggest nightmare was being irrelevant. Wrong again. Try being way too relevant for about 15 seconds, right before the mob realizes your blood moon prophecy was just an eclipse and not a dragon slayer's coupon. Cue pitchforks, tar, and a 2-star Yelp review scratched onto your door with a shard of bone. The only thing more cursed than your forecasts, your personal hygiene. Bathing is a quarterly luxury, so by midsummer you could flavor soup by standing near it. At least it keeps the rats away. Sometimes. Your fate is perpetual buffering. If things go south, nobody remembers their requests, just your alleged failures. Best case, you're forgotten. Worst case, you're immortalized as that astrologer who screamed when the owl landed on the windowsill. Next week, your hospitality suite is the stocks. But hey, at least when the mob burns down your hut for a missed lunar eclipse, you won't have to hear their complaints anymore. Call it lost connection. Still toothless. Still cursed. Still buffering. Galileo got away with astrology until he didn't. You'd be lucky if you lasted one harvest. Here, the paradox, everybody wants a horoscope, but God help you if it sounds too pagan, too flattering, or too accurate. The church says peering at stars is fine as long as you say it's for God's glory, not your pocket. The clever move. Dodge blame by calling it astronomy. Too bad your next prediction is one plague outbreak from heresy anyway. Every time you jot down a planetary alignment, you're betting your neck that nobody with a pointy hat takes offense this week. Cast a chart for a noble, and you'd better hope Mercury isn't retrograde and the archbishop isn't bored. Devise one bad omen, and suddenly you're explaining yourself to men who have never bathed but own axes. Your whole job is a tightrope, too much faith, heretic. Not enough faith, heretic, breathing, let's check. Imagine being canceled by people with actual pitchforks, not Twitter hashtags. Yeah, you're the medieval middle manager. Everyone's mad and human resources is the Inquisition. Still think you'd crush it at palm reading. Fold the hand. Here's the official rulebook: astrology isn't magic if it's wrapped in enough Latin and ends with Deus Vult. Write your predictions with squiggly symbols and call it science, not sorcery. Better yet, predict the sun will rise tomorrow. A coward's move, but it keeps your head attached. Unless you're really lucky, you can't win. The peasants want you to say their sick cow will recover. The priest wants you to say their sick cow has sinned. The local baron wants to blame someone for his rotten harvest, you usually. The stars never mention the Lord is incompetent, so guess who ends up in the stocks? Want specifics? Fine. In 1324, Secco d'Ascoli got crisped at the stake for calling the Virgin's birth astrally significant. His error: using charts for the wrong chart topper. The only star the church wants you to follow was born in a barn. And don't get smug. Even the big guns like Johannes Kepler's so-called math genius spent most of their lives side-hustling astrology just to pay rent. Smart guy, but still cornered by dukes in velvet capes demanding to know why their gout won't clear up. The stars say, try not eating 12 swans a week. Thanks Kepler. But medieval life never makes sense. The king's baby gets a birth chart triumph. The neighbor's baby gets one heresy. The difference, context coin an hour of confession. You could spend days plotting star positions, mumbling about Mars and Leo, only for some scribe to copy your work, call it folk magic, and drop you in a legal wood chipper. Best case scenario, you play both sides. In public, you're all about spheres and harmonies and God's grand design. In private, you're a walking gossip rag with a celestial twist. Secretly, you know what everyone's really asking. Will this year be marginally less awful than the last? Worried about scientific integrity. Don't. Nobody else was. If you tell the churchgoers their chickens will thrive and the miller his arm won't get stuck in the gears again, you're a prophet. Miss one famine and suddenly you're a fraud apostate, or best case scenario, jobless. Worst case, trial by ordeal sounds cute until you meet the boiling water. Remember, medieval astrology is a choose-your-own-devil adventure. Flatter the nobles, but not too much. Scare the peasants, but not enough to start a riot. Quote Aristotle if you want the scholars to like you, Ptolemy for the clergy, and the neighbor's cousin's almanac if you're desperate. The only constant, if something goes wrong, it's your fault. The stars told them so. Side note, try not to invent any new planets. The church still thinks Saturn is edgy. Uranus, don't even go there. If you glimpse a comet duck, it's never good news. Nobody wants to hear the tale means civil unrest. That gets you more unrest and even less head. The fine print of astrological survival, always hedge. Replace will happen with may occur. Add a footnote if God wills it. Blame solar eclipses for failed prophecies. If backed into a corner, quote the Bible. Doesn't matter if it's relevant, just mumble in Latin. The crowd will clap. Meanwhile, don't expect gratitude. Nobles want assurance their sons will live through winter. Merchants want luck for their grain boats. If anything goes off script, drownings, crop burns, muddy jousts, you're one angry mob away from a bonfire. Spoiler, the torches double as pitchfork sharpeners. Want to modernize? Imagine doing daily horoscopes, but every bad vibes forecast could land you waterboarded in a river courtesy of the local church warden. Lucky color brown. Lucky number whatever matches your surviving fingers. And oh, the branding. One slip and you're a necromancer or diviner with all the benefits, like extra rats in your cell. Less Harry Potter, more Ren Fair meets Saw I. Word gets around. Next week, you're the local punchline. Hey, guess who thought his job was safe? The stargazer. Wonder why astrology survived. People need hope and scapegoats. Happy charts get you free bread. Ominous charts keep you useful. And when the weather kills the crops, no matter what, congrats, you're back in the hot seat. Medieval job security, equal parts customer service, and open mic at the gallows. Bottom line, you're stuck parsing the cosmos for people who wish you just shut up and fix the rain. Say something too clever and you're a witch. Too simple and you're a fraud. There is no winning this game. Twitter mobs have nothing on pitchforks, and HR never wore red velvet and chains. So go ahead, chart the stars, write your prophecies, and pray the next plague skips your village. Just remember, in medieval Europe, the real omens wore robes and carried keys to the dungeon. Still cold, still accused, still not dead. Smile for the stars. You see a bonfire. That's not festive, it's for you. Somehow, Mercury's in retrograde got translated very efficiently into kill the bringer of bad news. All it took was a herd of sickened cows, 3 barns burning down, and enough missing goats to start a militia. In medieval Europe, disaster had an accent, and apparently you spoke it fluently. You thought you were just gently managing expectations. It's a bad season for wheat, everyone stay alert. The stars said blight and rain, so you did the neighborly thing and shared. Congratulations, you've officially stacked the entire mood against yourself. Your warning reads in public opinion as self-fulfilling prophecy. Not only are you not helping, the villagers already blame you for having the audacity to see it coming. Hindsight is free foresight gets you smoke in the lungs. Nobody cares about celestial influences when their bread tastes like the bottom of a rain barrel and their kids cough up blood. Explain Saturn's opposition all you want, nobody choose theory when their last carrot has fungus. Your horoscope column. Tried it, hated it, canceled after 2 issues. The village wanted hope, not cosmic caveats, and hope is in short supply, just ahead of firewood, salt, and mayors who can count to 30 without taking their shoes off. It's not like you're alone in this. Simon de Fairs wrote almanacs for kings and still had to dodge more mobs than the local tax collector. This man had royal stationery and still ran out the back door whenever a comet passed overhead. He survived by sprinting and, let's be honest, a better sense of window placement than his peers. You, not so lucky. By the time you spot the angry crowd, they're more organized than your short-lived astrology club. Comets, eclipses, any shiny thing in the sky is basically an eviction notice for astrologers. The moment a blood-red moon rises, you're banished to the main square before the pitchfork stops steaming. Take your time with nuance, and you'll be explaining planetary motion to a pitchfork. They don't want to hear about inferiors and retrogrades. They're here for infernos and regrets. Let's break down the mob. They're not here to listen. They're here for closure, and your face fits. Half of them failed to recognize Mercury on a clear night. The other half would trade Venus for a sausage. They've got torches, ropes, and enough rumors to fill a monastery's library. Hate reading your almanac is the closest they've come to education all season. 1 minute you're demonstrating parallax with a stick, the next you're dodging rocks the size of your sense of self-preservation. The only reason you're not already tied up is because the local blacksmith needs time to find spare rope. Remember how you told them retrograde motion is only apparent. Great, now explain apparent to someone who thinks planets are just shiny potatoes. Their literacy, like their patience, is tightly focused. They read fire, smoke, and who to blame. And that blame has a rotating cast: the devil, the local Jews, the woman with too many cats. But today you, the astrologer who predicted failure and didn't pay the village tithe in hope. You thought knowledge would buy you protection. Turns out I can interpret the heavens is just medieval for try me first. This is a village where the mayor decides guilt by how much you squint at the stars, and he's got cataracts. The apothecary who sells dubious oils, Teflon. The midwife with mysterious herbs, untouchable. But you pointing upward at a planet nobody can name are a walking target with a big shiny blame me pin. Let's dissect your crimes. First, your timing. Bad news during Lent. Why not just walk around with a sign saying, "Smite me"? Second, your attitude. Apparently, I only read the signs counts as arrogance. Finally, your results. The harvest is dead, the bread's gone black, and the only crop doing well is suspicion. Try explaining retrograde motion to a mob whose last science experiment was, what happens if you pour ale on a fire? There's a certain poetic symmetry. As Mercury appears to go backward, so does their willingness to believe in rationality. All their hope runs out once yours does too. Now it's torches, ropes, and accusations screamed by people who don't know a planet from a potato. You're still clinging to your notes while they're debating whether it's faster to drown you or burn you. Don't bother quoting Ptolemy. They'd rather quote your screams. You could try a last-ditch charm offensive. I don't control the heavens. You shout over the crackle. But they've heard it before. The witches, the lepers, the unlucky left-handers. They all say the same thing. The mob reminds you with every stick and stone, neither do the dead. Hope you had a punchy horoscope lined up. Things may look grim, but brighter days are ahead. Maybe. If you count ahead as anything after they're done with you. The crowd's patience for nuance makes a mayfly's lifespan look indulgent. Biology isn't on your side, and neither are the stars. Still want credit for that astrology column. You're all out of backup plans and still in the square. Mercury's in retrograde, so is your luck. Welcome to Crisis Communications, 14th century edition. You can see the worst is coming and nobody cares until it's lighting your feet on fire. You thought this gig came with its own velvet chair and unlimited cosmic insight. Try this: everyone who matters wants you to be a miracle factory and calculator in a world where stars are just dots and algebra is black magic. The king expects you to predict a solar eclipse, cure his gout, and justify his next temper tantrum, preferably before lunch. Scientists, what few there are, want proofs. Royalty wants magic. You have neither unless you count those dusty star maps you copied last Tuesday from some monk who couldn't spell Venus. Let's get real. Your research is 1 part Aristotle, 2 parts badly drawn goat, and 3 parts desperate improvisation. The king hears there'll be a solar eclipse. He wants a date. You hand him a best guess wrapped in a scroll, praying nobody notices that your formula is last year's but with the numbers flipped. Is the sun feeling shy? Congratulations, you're now a heretic. No pressure. Meanwhile, courtiers squint at you like you're an exotic beetle half-hopping. You'll burst into prophecy mid-supper. Spoiler alert: Tycho Brahe had a brass nose and a pet moose. That's not even the part history thinks is weird. Royal patrons like England's Henry VIII, who believed being born under a certain constellation made him extra special, were desperate for omens. If you gave an answer that wasn't glowing enough, you'd be lucky to escape with a paper cut. If it was too glowing, congratulations, now everything that goes wrong is your fault. Remind me, what's your predicted date for the next harvest? If it rains frogs, you're toast. The job description changes without notice. 1 week you're a holy man, the next convenient scapegoat. Did the king's cousin get a mysterious rash? Must be Saturn in retrograde. Did the treasury run dry? Clearly Venus didn't approve of this year's tax policy. They don't call on logic, just on you, the court's walking insurance policy against fate. And when the king's mistress shows up at your door nervous about the position of Mars, you tell her what she wants to hear, because disappointment comes with a side of exile. Math. Sure, you'll do the math. On an abacus with half the beads missing and a treatise in Latin written by someone who didn't believe in zero. Meanwhile, science is barely crawling out of the ooze, and you're supposed to be the bridge between God and Galileo. Your data set vague, rumors questionable, birth times, and planets nobody has seen without squinting. By the way, ever tried to measure the heavens through a moldy window using an astrolabe that was dropped down a flight of stairs during last year's plague scare? Your precision instrument is a stick and a guess. The best universities give you an honorary degree in hand-waving plus a cold chicken leg if you're lucky. Want an apple? Hope Isaac Newton doesn't need it for an experiment first if he ever shows up. Here are your real tools: half a horoscope from Ptolemy mangled by centuries of bad translations. 3 dubious lunar tables that disagree with each other. The king's favorite lucky hour, which is always now. A kitchen maid's whispered birthday rumor that changes when she's drunk. Some candles wax pooling faster than your credibility. Still aiming for precision. Good luck, Copernicus. Because if you can't deliver a miracle wrapped in proof, and you won't, someone's going to notice. The king's court is a competitive workplace, and your closest colleague is a guy named Giles who reads livers. HR is a guillotine. You're too rational for royalty, too mystical for the scholars, and much too alive for the Inquisition. So why are you here? Because you wanted to matter. You wanted to impress someone. Maybe you still think the next king will love your charts. Or maybe you just like the smell of old ink. Here's a fun fact: the highest paid astrologer in Renaissance Prague, Johannes Kepler, spent half his career making up star charts for a warlord who preferred horoscopes written to flatter his ego. The rest of the time, Kepler was trying not to get arrested for using wait-for-it mathematics that made sense. You'd think inventing the laws of planetary motion might earn you a day off. Instead, it got him more work. Great. Now do my wife's chart and explain why last year's tomato crop failed. Ever tried to tell a baron that the alignment of Mercury isn't to blame for his bad luck? They'll listen if you bribe the kitchen first and agree to read their dog's future. Fail, and suddenly your room has no door handle. Welcome to the gig economy medieval edition. Chicken pay zero, benefits existential dread included. You spend nights staring at the stars praying for a comet, or at least a believable omen too small to get you killed. Nights without sleep, days without answers, mornings rewriting predictions, so the king's horoscopes keep up with the rumor mill. You want to invent statistics just to cover the gaps, if anyone believed in numbers, that is. Every bold face in your charts is a gamble. If this drought ends, maybe they'll forget that awkward plague prediction. If another royal baby dies, better have Venus retrograde ready as your excuse. Send enough reports and eventually one will be right. And the scholars, real men of letters, half of them think the earth sits on turtle's back, the rest are arguing about how many angels can dance on yours. Try floating heliocentrism. At dinner, watch the wine spill and the whispers start. Welcome to Academic Peer. Review one letter to the bishops, and you're the guest of honor at a very pointy bonfire. Even if you could give everyone what they want, miracles, math, validation, and comfort, you'd still be alone. Starved for approval, chained to contradiction, you make it to morning one answer short of a beheading. Nobody cares how hard you're trying. They want certainty that doesn't exist and a scapegoat on retainer. Math or miracles, all anyone sees is failure. Still cold. Still chained. Still not dead. Funny thing about death, it's never scheduled. You and your star charts can plot Saturn's every tantrum, but the Black Plague didn't check your horoscope, didn't even RSVP. Bubonic fleas bite the village, starts coughing, and now your consulting room smells like a meat market on trash day. You think you're clever, so you reassure the local lord. Venus trine Jupiter, nothing to fear. 4 days later, everyone's bleeding out of places you haven't even mapped. Your apprentice wants to know if Mercury in retrograde explains why the mayor's children are coughing up blood. You tell him, sure, blame Mercury. Then duck because the mayor's wife just hurled a crucifix at your head and called you a fraud, which, let's be honest, isn't entirely wrong. Minutes later, she's bargaining with God in the next room while you poke at fever charts as if math will outwit a bacterium. Spoiler, the only thing multiplying faster than infection is skepticism. You're not alone. Nostradamus got famous for surviving, not predicting. His real legacy, rosewater and dodging crowds. Meanwhile, you're handed a shovel and an audience. If you saw this in the stars, why is the priest's favorite nephew now a boil-ridden corpse? Not an ideal time to remind anyone about free will. Local astrologers once got paid in fine wine and promises. Now they're getting paid in awkward silence and the occasional thrown shoe. The old expectations are circling the drain. 5 years ago, you told the magistrate his lucky talisman would protect his house. Now that house is boarded up, windows blackened from smoke, and nobody bothers asking for horoscopes when they're running out of incense and clean linens. Newsflash: plague eats through silk faster than hope. Astrology, it turns out, doesn't have a vaccine. Nothing like a pandemic to remind the crowd their fates aren't written in starlight, but in rat droppings, half-rotten grain, and the sharp end of a flea's mouth. People are still clutching their birth charts at night, but only because parchment is easier to burn than dead bodies. Faith in the stars used to be comforting. Now it's just flammable. Outside, they're stacking bodies like kindling, while you recalculate birth charts in a room that's mostly empty now. Plague doctors pass with beaks stuffed in old leather, even they've got better job security than you. Hospitals won't take astrologers, unless you fit in the wagon feet first. The quarantine guards have clearer rules than the constellations. Do you have boils? No, you can't come in. Yes, you can leave on a stretcher. The only celestial event that matters lately is the full moon reflecting off the pile of empty carts outside town. You wanted to read about Jupiter aligning with Mars. Here's an alignment: grave diggers lined up at midnight, shoulders hunched, boots sticky with fluids you stopped nomming last week. Even gilded nobles, the ones who swore the stars made them untouchable, now trade fortunes for folk remedies and stand in line beside the same pig farmers who used to spray mud on their carriages. The cosmic order has all the reliability of a medieval sewer overflowing whenever you most need it not to. You'd blame it on Mars retrograde if you thought anyone was listening. Too late. The only thing aligning is grief, and your predictions just cost you another client. Still want to argue about planetary influence? Sure, just yell louder, maybe you can outshout the bells. But don't worry, the authorities have a plan. Inquisitors stomp from hut to hut sniffing for witchcraft as if hexes punched holes in people's lymph nodes. You'd love to point out that even an illiterate cowherd knows the difference between a curse and a cough, but it's hard to be snarky when you're avoiding mob justice. The only thing less predictable than the plague: the mob's sense of irony. You should have pivoted to selling candles or plague-proof amulets. The local herbalist is making a killing emphasis on the killing. She at least pretends the rosemary will save you. Astrologers, meanwhile, get blamed for bringing the disease or not warning louder. You try not to choke on the punchline: destiny is a great gig until the townsfolk come in with pitchforks. If anyone's keeping score, here's the real horoscope: Aries, your livestock will die. Taurus, your crops will rot. Gemini, your family moves into the barn because the house smells like vinegar and pus. Everyone's lucky numbers: 0 unless you count survivors. The stars said kings were born under lucky constellations, but the lice never got that memo. Crowned heads are just as lice-ridden and poxed as stable boys. Turns out feudal privilege and astrological advice make a great wallpaper for a death cart, but a lousy shield against disease. You start to notice which questions are missing from the night's lineup. Where is my soulmate? Will I be rich? When will this end? What a time to believe the sky cares about your individual love life. Reality check: the universe doesn't blink when an entire district lights up with plague marks. Your story is a single brushstroke on a much larger mural, one painted mostly in vile mud and spit. If Saturn had a message, it was don't get comfortable. Remember how before the plague people obsessed over which hour to plant beans or trim a beard? Now they're arguing over which door to nail shut and who gets the last handful of garlic. The only calendar people trust is the slow, relentless count of who's left to bury the bodies, which is, as far as evidence goes, pretty damning. Every astrologer promised order and the years delivered entropy. You still have your star charts stacked in the corner gathering dust, still cold, still unburned, still useless. By the time the coughing stops, reputation's not your biggest concern. The only fate that interests anyone is a clean bill of health. The shining constellations hang over a Europe that's lost its appetite for cosmic advice. Can't blame them. There is, after all, only so many times you can say, "This too shall pass," before it sounds like begging. So want to keep arguing about planetary influence? Go on, shout your theories. Maybe the echo will drown out the church bells. If it does, congratulations, you've finally predicted something. Surprise, your star charts aren't the only thing getting scrutinized. There's a whole committee for that now, and they come in black robes, not lab coats. The Inquisition, think of them as the original data auditors, but instead of PowerPoint presentations, their preferred visual aid is fire. Remember Giordano Bruno? Fun fact, predicting too much too well or too weird earned him a front row seat to his own barbecue. But don't get comfortable thinking you can keep your visionary secrets to yourself. No, in medieval Europe, privacy goes the way of personal hygiene, missing, mourned, and deeply suspicious. You scribble a birth chart for some minor noble's child. Next week, you're explaining planetary retrogrades to a panel of ecclesiastical accountants, all of whom are mostly interested in how many demons helped you with your math. Every scratch of ink is evidence. Every lucky guess is a confession. This isn't Vegas. What happens in your observatory is public record, and the church holds the ledger. It gets better. The church doesn't want you to be wrong, but being right is somehow worse. Guess the king dies. Heresy. Guess he lives. Witchcraft. Guess the crops fail, the skis open, and everyone gets boils. You're a problem either way, Nostradamus. Split the difference. Congratulations, you've just given everyone a reason to hate you and none to trust you. There's no winning, just different speeds of losing. Take the case of Secco d'Ascoli, a guy with a moon obsession, sure, but he tried to play it safe. Purely academic, he protested as the flames climbed up his legs. Turns out the official stance is if you can even spell horoscope, you probably deserve a close encounter with hot iron and professional screen recorders. And here's the punchline, your actual predictions don't even matter. The process is the problem. Gouge into sheep guts or squint at Mars. The second people care what you think you're a rival source of truth. The church can't have that. God gets first billing, and the archbishop's thumb is always on the scale. Galileo only blinked you with the audacity to suggest planetary alignments could matter. Don't even get a courtroom. Just a cot bread and enough prayers to choke a Benedictine. It's like Airborne, but for pain-limited amenities, no refunds, and your only review is unholy guest would never host again. Feeling clever? Maybe don't. Medieval self-preservation, tip: the less detail you provide, the better. Vague prophecies. Sometimes safer until the peasants try to interpret them for you. And if your patrons want good news, you better hand it over with a side of Bible verse. Step off script and suddenly you're not a wise advisor. You're a sorcerer, a heretic, or best case, a joke nobody dares laugh at. And laughter in these times is a capital offense. And you're never off their radar. You can't even fake enthusiasm, too much mystical insight. And suddenly you're on trial for knowing more than God wants. Think of it like the world's most stressful student-teacher conference, except wrong answers land you in irons and right answers get you a full-body exfoliation courtesy of the fires of divine disappointment. Galileo blinked in their direction and got house arrest for the rest of his life. Let's talk about due process. The Inquisition's cross-examination technique. Less law order, more guess who gets waterboarded before lunch. Suspect you're too lucky. Now's a good time to throw yourself on the mercy of St. Anthony, patron of lost causes and apparently amateur astrologers. Confession or no confession, their preferred outcome is public spectacular and above all instructional. Your neighbors get a front row seat to the consequences of curiosity. Tickets are free, attendance is mandatory. And remember, the tools of your trade are now evidence of evil. Crystal spheres get cracked open for hidden runes. Calendars are inspected for suspicious symbols. Even your hourglass is suspect after all. What is timekeeping but a subtle declaration that the stars move in patterns knowable to mortals? Better not own a telescope unless you want your inheritance to be ashes in the street. And those who think to run think twice. Borders exist mostly for tax collection. Superstition moves faster than any horse. Your reputation precedes you, usually nailed to the town square with a helpful sketch, wanted for knowing too much. Prizes include travel discomfort and the possibility of meeting some lovely torturers named after minor saints. Even compliance isn't safe. That benign, harmless advice could be twisted mid-trial. He said the eclipse would bring rain. My son caught a fever. Is that murder? You don't need to swing a sword to get labeled a threat. Just gaze east at the wrong hour, comment on the weather, or happen to mention Mercury retrograde during a famine. Still think astrology's just light entertainment. Medieval Europe turned reading the stars into a contact sport with a 40% fatality rate and limited access to clean water. But sure, what's my sign? It's scorch marks. Still warm. Still watching. So next time someone asks for a forecast, here's one: appropriate levels of mortal danger, unexpected acts of irony, and a high chance of someone, possibly you, regretting the entire concept of a calendar. Stay tuned, stay vague, and above all, keep guessing. The church is still keeping score. Astrology is fun and games until your horoscope accidentally tells a war criminal he's about to get what's coming. Oops. Now you're the only one sweating at the feast. Turns out nobody in power wants to hear they'll face retribution under Saturn and Mars, especially when their idea of retribution is sacking villages and impaling the odd neighbor. Don't get too comfortable with "it's just ancient personality quizzes." In the Renaissance, astrology was less a BuzzFeed time waster, more a medieval HR report card. Except if management disliked your evaluation, they could feed you to wolves. Real wolves, with names. One wrong word and your tomorrow's prediction. Take Cesare Borgia, Renaissance power broker, inspiration for Machiavelli, winner of most killed rivals before breakfast. Give him a horoscope about bad omens or consequences for your choices, and suddenly your meat pie tastes like fear. Good news, you just invented death by vague metaphor. War, pestilence, legal judgment, you wrote that. Bad news, Cesare thinks it's a subpoena from the universe. And it's not just Cesare. Pick your century: Vlad the Impaler, Ivan the Terrible, Genghis Khan, if he's feeling domestic. Every court astrologer's dream client: a guy whose hobbies are shadowy poisonings and dealing with insubordination creatively. They ask for their fortune. You see their body count. You write carefully, like trying to defuse a bomb with a soup spoon. You can't win. Too flattering, you're a sycophant. Too honest, you're a heretic. Too cryptic, the kings say you're plotting. Now every frustrated noble, backstabbing courtier, or freelance warlord reads their monthly future in your squiggles, and everyone has a sword. You could write a horoscope about unexpected travel and someone's uncle gets beheaded by Monday. The crowd is tough and the knives are literal. There's no way to please everyone. Write an optimistic forecast and the queen's rival complains that you're fueling sedition. Write a subtle warning and the duke thinks you've hexed his harvest. Suggest transformation and half the court wonders who's sleeping in the river this week. Your best case scenario is vague, confusing, and somehow still incriminating. Let's talk methods. Modern astrology is cryptic on purpose. In medieval times, it was survival instinct. You say Mercury is in retrograde, they hear the traitors are coming out of the walls. There's no safe word. There's barely a safe verb. Every phrase is a political Rorschach. If it looks like a threat, it is a threat. It's not just the big fish either. The lower nobility, landless sons, overeager priests, and exiled cousins took their horoscopes dead serious. Way more fun than chess, way less mercy. They'd base vendettas, marriages, even murder sprees on the reading of the stars. And guess who gets blamed if things go sideways? You. Of course it's you. The stars compelled me, says the man with a bloody sword, as if astrology is a legal defense now. They say astrology means mapping destiny. In practice, it's licking the boots of men who bathe in blood. Every horoscope has to fit everyone. Just pray, grim tidings isn't too on the nose for the guy fresh from a siege. The wrong phrase and you're hauled from your candlelit hovel to the dungeon like Yelp. But each review is a potential execution. Let's set the scene. You're dragged before the great hall, half awake, sweat pooling into your best cloak. The ceiling is painted with stars, but the audience is just waiting for you to slip. Maybe a cardinal is glaring in the corner. Wasn't his prediction last week about unexpected collapse? Did anyone tell you his bridge fell down? You remember now. Bad luck. Even worse timing. It doesn't matter that you learned your planetary alignments from Ptolemy, not from the devil. The only stars that matter now are painted on the ceiling of the war room, where they're deciding if you get the headsman or the fire. They hurl your charts on the table with yesterday's bread crusts. You're asked to explain why Mars is opposing sovereignty. You try stammer, invent a comet no one's seen. No one laughs. Ever been accused of treason by someone who can't read Latin but definitely loves a spectacle? It's like being on trial from your own badly translated group chat. There's no winning, just surviving. The medieval flavor of cancel culture, one hint of ill omen, and you're publicly unfriended by guillotine. Now you're wishing you chosen hedge-mending, pig counting, or literally any trade less likely to involve summary execution. But here you are clutching a wax-sealed horoscope surrounded by starving guards who use astrologers for bar bets. They ask for a reading. You see the empty eyes, the blood-stained floor, the flicker of torchlight, and you lie. Winds of fortune are shifting. Some will rise, some will fall. The math checks out. Statistically, everyone is sometimes unlucky. Medieval justice doesn't care about your disclaimers. You warn of great upheaval. The king's men hear rebellion next Thursday. You mention Mars in retrograde. The head torturer thinks Mars is code for sabotage. They don't want the truth. They want an alibi. Still love astrology. Picture this: you're in a cell-sharing space with a rat who's memorized your sun's sign. The only calendar is a scratch tally on the wall. Destiny. Not in the stars, it's in the hands of the guy holding the keys. And in the morning, he wants his reading, something hopeful, something vague, something he can't use as evidence. Sleep tight. Tomorrow you'll be writing. The future holds darkness and change. Still accurate. Still not helping. Still chained. You were the golden child of the court. Yesterday the king hung on your every mumble about Jupiter's mood swings. You were medieval life's answer to Google, a little mysterious, permanently necessary, and about as reliable as a candle in a downpour. Everyone wanted a word. Is the comet a prophecy or just bad optics? Can Uncle Jeff's rash be cured by goat urine, or should they call the monk? Miserable little townspeople squinted at you like you might cough up silver coins just for reading a cloud the right way. Even the local bishop sidled up to ask whether next Tuesday favored an excommunication. But here's the fine print: your brilliance came with an expiration date stamped in invisible ink. Royal gratitude had the shelf life of week-old mutton. All it took was a single inconvenient plague, or God help you, an unlucky lunar eclipse, and suddenly your predictions got performance reviewed by an angry mob with pitchforks and the collective IQ of a turnip field. Then something bad happened. Crops failed. Some baron's son started drooling and died. Or God forbid England lost another war. Suddenly everyone remembers your auspicious forecast about good harvests and favorable winds. They're quoting you now, out loud, to men with swords. And there's no justice in the finger-pointing Olympics. Kings didn't lose wars, they were betrayed by bad omens and blockbuster disasters. Your tidy little astronomical charts, those became evidence. You see, your grace, the wizard said the stars would bless your turnips. If the harvest rotted, clearly your math was the real rot. Forget the king's gluttony or the bishop skimming off the church's grain. Nobody likes a celestial weatherman with a bad batting average. It's not just awkward, it's fast. History's full of names you'd rather not swap business cards with. Secco d'Ascoli burned alive for algebra gone heretical. Nostradamus spent most of his life ducking mobs and his own plague forecasts. John D. mathematical prodigy and Queen Elizabeth's consultant double-checked every horoscope for traitorous subtext. You see, trusted advisor is less of a promotion and more of a trapdoor. Here comes your first slip on the mud-slick ladder. You stood by the king's table reciting planetary arrangements like they would need bread or mend bones. People clapped, but witchcraft only thrives under a roof the second lightning hits it. Witch, not architect. You'd think burning the messenger would fall out of fashion, but no. It was practically a team sport. Secco d'Ascoli tried to do math in Italy. They roasted him. Hypatia mapped stars in Alexandria. Fans dismembered her for her trouble. Science in the Middle Ages, high stakes, lousy benefits. Nobody blames the king, or the bishop, or pestilence. They blame the wizard who promised stars, then delivered bad weather and dead suns. You can almost set your hourglass by it. One moment you're invited to royal banquets, the next you're licking slime off a dungeon wall explaining planetary retrograde to the rats. Here's your reward for forecasting, sunshine and blessings. What you get is mildew. Chains so heavy you discover new muscle groups. The other prisoners ask about horoscopes while eating their own boots. Irony, you always predicted a hard winter, never mentioned being dinner. Medieval people loved a scapegoat like a dog loves a fallen sausage. It's the same principle as modern PR. When things go south, find someone nearby who isn't holding a sword and blame them loudly. And in the hierarchical free-for-all of medieval society, the astrologer, mystical, clever, foreign-sounding, ticks every box. Your calendar says Jupiter's in retrograde. Congratulations. The Baron's idiot nephew just tripped, and now you're conspiring against the crown. Your only defense is a vocabulary longer than the average guard's arm. Will it save you? Only if you can explain the fine print of Saturn's influence before they run out of patience or rope. If your explanation for last year's lucky stars involves mysterious cosmic variants, expect a future of mysterious missing teeth. Dark corners, torch smoke, slop buckets, like airmen, but for pain. The guards have instructions to keep the wizard talking. In a few years, the only question will be whether they burned you for heresy or literary style. There's always someone to blame when the universe disappoints. In this era, it's not the guy bleeding peasants dry, it's you, the mouthpiece, with yesterday's golden tongue and today's unfortunate timing. Get used to the phrase, "we found the culprit." Still hungry for after-dinner speeches? No problem. Dinner's canceled. You're on the menu. You can try to hedge next year's prophecies. The harvest may prosper, except when it doesn't. Make your language loopier than a drunk squirrel. It won't help. The public wants certainty, and certainty is what gets you killed. The smarter you sounded yesterday, the harder the fall today. Welcome to the medieval gig economy. All reward is temporary, and all risk is mortal. Repeat after me, never be the most interesting person in the room. Kings forget, mobs remember, and the universe couldn't care less. You played the star reader, but when the house burns down, you're always the spark. Still cold, still chained, still not dead. But don't worry, there's always room for one more scapegoat. You know what happens when medieval PR campaigns go south. Heads roll, literally. One day you're painting Jupiter's path to impress a duke, the next you're introducing your neck to the town square's least ergonomic wooden block. Public execution is what you get when society tumbleweeds all its epic fails into one unlucky scapegoat. Usually the person who predicted last year's bumper harvest of famine, fire, and questionable rashes. Forget one-star reviews or viral takedown threads. Picture this: a packed plaza, the air thick with garlic pitch and peasant glee. Judith the turnip seller is there front row, ready to boo your auspicious conjunction. Nobody's debating astrology versus science. They're too busy betting how far your head will roll. Step up, medieval astrologer, your rotten apple moment awaits, rotten apples included. Yelling was the comment section, spittle was the reply. No refunds, no moderated comment threads. Just you and the business end of Henry the Hangman, a guy whose last dental appointment was in the previous century. That's HR in the 1300s, stinking ropes, crowdsourced justice, zero due process. And your best hope is that the executioner's hangover doesn't make him miss. Think cancellation is rough in 2024. Try getting canceled by Axe. If you're lucky, it happens fast. If not, ask Thomas of Exeter, whose predictions turned out as popular as leeches in wine. Torture first, execution after. It's the only job where a slight clerical error ends with your actual clergy-fueled death. Them's the breaks when your Apple Watch is actually an apple. Get the Mars is in retrograde, forecast wrong, and suddenly you're on trial for causing the king's boils, the rain never coming, and why the neighbor's cottage smells like feet. Did you predict twins for the Duchess, but she pops out a single heir with 6 fingers? No problem. Just explain to the High Inquisitor why you weren't reading the stars hard enough. It gets better. Misfortune used to be a moral failing. Your spreadsheet is off by a decimal, someone loses their banana bread savings, and you become the reason for all the years, fires, blights, and suspicious livestock deaths. Watch as the crowd turns all those nervous feudal souls desperate for a scapegoat who isn't them. Good luck with crowd control when what goes around comes around is taken literally by a head. Forget irony. The real punchline is that half the crowd isn't even sure what you did, but that doesn't matter. They heard something about the moon, the king's hives, or a cursed cow. Suspicion is a contact sport, and public execution day is basically a festival: street food, gory souvenirs, and a fresh round of gossip for everyone who already traded sanity for soggy socks. No popcorn, but plenty of creative heckling. Let's break it down. You're marched out, wrists tied with rope that smells like years of disappointment. The town bell rings for the only calendar event more reliable than rain, tax, or plague. Kids sit on shoulders yelling curses their parents pretend not to know. The executioner's apprentice flubs his lines again. The crowd loves it. Someone throws a turnip. It lands. Everyone pretends it was symbolic. Medieval Yelp 2 thumbs down permanently. There's no appealing to higher management when higher management is at the block oiling the axe. What did you do wrong exactly? Well, here's a short list of career-limiting reviews. Said the comet was lucky, except it lit up the castle literally. Promised a good harvest, got black rot and famine. Wrote a horoscope that said travel is safe. Cue the Lord's son falling off a horse 2 towns over. Failed to explain why Mercury rising made the abbot die of gout. Told the villagers an eclipse was nothing to worry about. The chickens rebelled. What's their recourse? Not a strongly worded email, just public demise. Yelp's misuse policy has nothing on a baying crowd with rotten cabbages. And let's not whitewash it, these events weren't just about punishment. They were about power pageantry and reminding everyone what happens when you cross the grain. The church made sure you knew God approved, or at least wasn't objecting. Local lords got credit for protecting folks by thinning out the error-prone. Even the shoeless got a bite. I may stink, says the peasant, but at least I'm not condemned by the Queen's astrologer. It's easy to forget, scrolling past outrage online, how visceral things got when outrage had no outlet except a stone-paved square and a weaponized crowd. There was no shadow banning, no chance to delete your account after trending for all the wrong reasons. Once you were up there, that was it. No one cared that you only worked for the king because you inherited your cousin's star charts. The closest you get to a review is a ballad later, one that turns you into a walking punchline centuries before stand-up comedy. Here lies John with stars and planets read one wrong, now food for bandits. Still you want a real sense of dread. These were the good executions. The bad ones lingered. A dull axe means 2, 3, sometimes 4 swings before the job done. The block, stained with a family-sized sample of previous reviews. Besides, you don't just die, you headline then fade from memory, replaced by the next mispredictor or unlucky neighbor who planted beans on a saint's feast day. All this and for what? Because you tried to make sense of chaos with a few stolen Greek texts and a sky blotted by missed candle smoke and hereditary myopia. Your last meal, cold barley soup, the flavor of regret served with a side of everyone's approval for your soon-to-be absent presence. So still want to blame Mercury? Go ahead. His retrograde isn't saving you, now he's front row too, passing notes with Judith, the turnip seller, both waiting to see if you'll stick the landing. In medieval ratings, everyone's a critic, and in the end, the only star you get is the last one you see before blackout. Let's paint the scene. Your career arc doesn't bend toward quiet retirement or dramatic resignation. No, your closing act arrives with smoke, fire, and an audience of everyone who ever doubted your daily horoscope. You will face challenges today, you warned. Turns out the challenge is roasting steadily while your employer, the high table, chews on sweetmeats and claps politely as your fate sears into folklore. Welcome to the original cancellation, only the algorithm is boredom, and the trending topic is you on a pile of damp sticks. Forget severance packages. Here job security expires the minute you mispredict a royal birth or fail to bless an unlucky anniversary. Step out of line, remind the king he's got Saturn retrograde, and a cousin with sharper cheekbones, and it's straight to the woodpile. Joan of Arc, dressed in the latest suit of God's armor, didn't get a medal, she got a stake. Giordano Bruno, celestial philosopher, hit his cosmic career high by providing Rome with a barbecue nobody could forget. If the floor is lava sounds fun at your office, imagine it as your last professional performance sponsored by church and state. You want a party. Medieval executions made it a household event. No RSVP, only pure morbid curiosity required. The economy of death ran on zero budget. Bring your family and a picnic, and let the kids play under the gallows while you judge the victim's resolve. Forget mobile notifications. Your status update is the smell of flesh wood smoke and the muffled howls of the condemned. Royalty parks up front, plague masks optional, but peasants crowd every available cart just to glimpse divine vengeance, or at least a break from watching wheat rot. Because here's the thing, the royals paid for your star wisdom, right up until it got inconvenient. For months, you've sketched Mars retrograde, spun tailies about Saturn's mood swings, and mapped enough fortuitous conjunctions to justify a dozen wars. No one cared as long as your charts made the king look kissed by fate. But mention a sour alignment the day before a royal wedding, or moan quietly about fire in the east, and you get penciled in as the entertainment, literally. You thought you were reading the stars. Turns out the stars are reading you. Still confused how this is entertainment? Picture your own office birthday party, but now the cake is failure and the candles are your toes. Death at the stake wasn't exactly instant. Green wood means slow burn, more time for public reflection, less time for quick mercy. The smell, a mix of bacon gone wrong and priestly incense. The main course, the priest's oration, a rousing speech on why God really hates freelancers. Spoiler, he doesn't, he's just bored too. Executions like reality TV ran on escalation and spectacle. Crowd not impressed. Toss in a confession, maybe toss on a friend. If business is slow, make it a twofer, a heretic double feature. Everyone loves a good pairing. Sometimes they'd even let the condemned predict the weather. Will it rain tomorrow? Does it matter when I'm the forecast? Unless you think this was private trauma, think again. Records scribbled in wax and blood flew through town like medieval Twitter threads. Each retelling made the flames hotter, the screams a bit more melodic. Church officials always claimed it was about justice or purification, but nobody ever purified a royal cousin or a fat bishop. No, it remained a middle management death sentence, advisors, scribes, interpreters, astrologers. Every arm's-length expert was only as safe as the next mood swing. After all, sermons were cheap, but a burning was a proper event. Guaranteed full house, rain or shine. All your 5-star reviews collected for decades instantly overshadowed by this one sticky headline. Local star whisperer ignites royal festival literally. Let's recap how you got here. Advised caution on royal finances, coin lost to war. Predicted hostilities in the east. Result: hostilities arise from your direction. Suggested rescheduling the Queen's third wedding due to Mercury retrograde, outvoted by her favorite hound. Failed to spot the King's affair with his cousin. That's astrology, not psychology. Your performance review is now delivered in kindling. Job prospects charred. The punchline: the very predictions that buried you in print or in ashes still got recycled at next year's harvest festival. Remember the burning? Of course they do. Nothing punctuates peacetime quite like watching the intellectuals go up in smoke. It keeps the villagers docile and the nobles in silk. Whenever the crops fail, just blame last year's unlucky astrologer. If you guessed wrong, the gods are angry. If you guessed right, you're dangerous. Either way, the fire's the only sure winner. The court's PR machine worked overtime. God's justice prevails. Actually, it's just the king ducking responsibility again. Clever moves set a precedent, torch a reputation, keep the rest of your counselors staring at their shoes. Subtle intimidation, medieval style. You thought being canceled online was rough. At least nobody toasts marshmallows at your digital funeral. Here your legacy is a pile of embers and a brief mention in someone's half-literate diary. Your greatest triumph: a crowd pleaser in a world thrilled by other people's pain. So maybe next time you're tempted to tweet about your rising sign, or spill a little astrological wisdom, glance at the smoke alarm first. Because history's original social media was a bonfire, the like button was a torch, and top comment just meant you screamed the loudest. Here reputations didn't fade, they combusted. You dreamed of making a mark on your age. Congratulations, you're officially a stain. Still want to forecast the future. Careful, the only thing ascending these days might be your Yelp stars. In a flash supernova. Burn bright, burn fast, disappear. That's entertainment. You learned math for this. Sorry, your calculations are now Exhibit A in your own execution. Someone's goats didn't breed, the eclipse was late, a royal nose started bleeding, and now your star chart has a court date. There's a scroll hand-copied in dying candlelight proving you predicted Louis IX would rise to glory, but look at him, halfway impaled and losing France by lunchtime. Your big break in numerology, court astrologer, hazard pay included. It looked glamorous: silk robes, Latin scribbles dabbing your quill while nobles pretend to understand declensions. But the perks end when the king fumbles a crusade or sneezes blood. Suddenly you're not the expert. You're the reason. That lucky hour you swore by. Turns out it was just unlucky for you. Testimony: a scribe who can't spell your name and a bishop who wants all charts banned except his own. Evidence: mostly a pile of astrology notes transcribed, meaning smeared by a kid who can't read Latin but sure can draw devils in the margin. There's a witness statement from the bread baker. If your abacus had a nick, they'd call it proof of heresy. Spot a comet. Apparently you summoned it to burn next year's wheat. Think your horoscope says you survive trial by ordeal. Plot twist, they add water or fire. Flip a coin, it's public humiliation either way. On Mondays, it's an iron brand to the hand. On Fridays, a swim in the local pond. You explain about retrogrades and parallax. No one cares. They want a scapegoat, not a seminar. Numbers are just heresy with extra ink stains, and error margin isn't an excuse, it's a confession. Galileo got house arrest for real astronomy half a millennium later. You don't even rate a lock on your cell door. There's no math defense against a baying mob who thinks epicycles mean witchcraft. Let's take inventory. Evidence pile 3 soggy star charts, 1 vandalized almanac, a cup of something pretending to be wine, and a rumor you own a secret compass. Expertise is a liability now. Your Latin, suspicious. Your counting, near sorcery. If you calculate planetary alignments faster than a bent stick in shadow, congratulations, that's called demonic assistance, and it's not covered by tenure. Defense strategy. You hope the judge skipped breakfast. You hope the jury confuses you with the candle maker. You hope nobody remembers that time you predicted rain and got locusts. Juries love quick verdicts, head spike, pike done. Not much difference between astrology and fraud. When the crops fail, the king's headaches linger, or Comet Halley decides to show up uninvited. Still want to be peer-reviewed? Congratulations, your peers are armed and illiterate. Glancing at the gallery is a mistake. Frowning merchants, nervous priests, the guy who tried to sell you a chicken last week. Most don't mind you until the weather turns. Next thing, someone's reciting your birth date as evidence. Your chart is now a confession. Was your sun in Scorpio when the river flooded? Time to grab a torch. Maybe you try reasoning, good luck. But celestial cycles are complex. The judge blinks. Is complexity heresy? When half your audience thinks the world is flat except for that one mountain, nuance dies a fast, silent death. Your advanced mathematics just means you're doubly damned too clever to trust, suspiciously free of dirt under your nails, and always scribbling when people are trying to pray. Your fate. It's a buffet, stocks, pillory exile, or the kind of exoneration that requires you to voluntarily donate every book you own to the town bonfire. If you're lucky, you just get banned from multiplying for a decade. If not, you get to explain your calculations to a block of wood and a swinging axe. Just for context, half the town can't count past 11 without removing a shoe. Their tax receipts are more fiction than Fibonacci. Yet here you are expected to explain orbital resonance before the soup runs cold. One sneeze from the bishop, and now your fate depends on whether he thinks quadrivium is a type of leprosy. Let's say you escape conviction. Great. You're now that witch with the charts. No one trusts your math, but everyone blames it. Someone's goat keels over next week, and you're chased from the market with whatever isn't nailed down. The next time you see the stars, you'll be face up on the cart, rattling toward the scaffold. No one checks your work. They check your pulse. Because in medieval justice, results matter, just not your results. Your calculations don't stand a chance against the weight of bacon shortages and royal migraines. You, still dead wrong. But hey, at least you finally got everyone to look up. So the stars have lied. And you slippery proto-influencer of the 1350s did too, except you had thumbscrews chewing through yours when you did it. Not poetic, just practical torture is the only way to make an astrologer confess that no, the conjunction of Mars and Saturn doesn't actually mean the king's boils will heal. You tried telling the truth at first. It was cute. Let's get specific. You're in a room that smells like animal fat, mildew, and anxiety. There's a bucket in the corner. The bench is bloodstained. You hope it's not recent. From across the room, Brother Tomas eyes you like he's the bouncer and you're the reason he's missing lunch. The tools on the wall have names, the pear, the Spanish boot, the Judas cradle, but none of them sound tasty. None of them have happy endings. Of course, this is all perfectly legal. The Malleus Maleficarum, that cozy bedtime manual for inquisitors, makes as much room for waterboarding as it does for prayer, and it's trending in dungeons from Avignon to Krakow. Prison reform, only if you count swapping wet ropes for boiling oil. There's papal paperwork for this signed, and sealed with a little wax blob that says, "Go ahead, twist until they squeal." Your only real hope is to faint before round 2. Which leads us to the celestial joke. Turns out they don't need to look at your horoscopes. They just need to hear you scream, "I made it up," while some earnest monk pours vinegar into your open wounds. Still want to correct their math. You practiced your astronomy for 12 years, they learned torture last week. Guess who's better at their job? Astrologers were easy targets. Too educated to be simple, too guessy to be trusted. Not rich enough to bribe their way out, not poor enough to be invisible. Caught in that sweet historical spot between respected advisor and public nuisance, which happens to be exactly what inquisitors are hunting for this decade. Here's the twist: the real crime is that the predictions were wrong. It's that you claim to know anything at all. Jean Bodin, witchcraft expert and generally dreary dinner guest, wrote entire volumes about how astrologers are more dangerous than the witches they claim to spot. That's your new brand, not just a fraud, but a fraud with delusions of grandeur. Nobody likes a smartass, especially not one who claims to see the future when they should be scrubbing chamber pots. For reference, witches at least had the courtesy to confess to things that made sense. "I danced with Satan, I spoiled the cow, the weather was my fault." Simple, relatable local problems. But you had charts and planetary tables and suspiciously abstract answers. People hate a riddle on fire. Look around all those star charts and lunar tables, the hours you spent learning to spell Ptolemy, gone. Turns out your body is just as squishy as everyone else's, and your mind, well, let's just say after 6 days of iron boots, and the rack, you're ready to say Mercury ate the moon if it'll buy you 5 minutes without screaming. And just for fun, here's a top 3 list of torture trends, 1350s edition. Water torture, not a spa day. No towels, just water in every hole you didn't know you had. The strappado hands behind your back, you get yanked in the air like a piñata, but the prizes are mostly shoulder dislocations. The boot, imagine your legs in a wooden vise, now add wedges and hammers. Not recommended for long walks afterward. It's like medieval influencer drama, except instead of cancel culture, you get dislocated joints. Your fellow prisoners watch with a kind of exhausted anticipation. Statistically, half of them will never leave this room. You might get lucky. Definition of lucky, subject to medieval terms and conditions.